BBC Radio Derby.
Make a difference.
A little after 2:15 then on your Tuesday afternoon. Now, a Uttoxeter woman is making a difference with her charity work and her inspirational thoughts of the day.
So I'm stood beside this block house that's also given a name of pillbox, and they were built all across the UK back in the 1940s, anticipating this German invasion. So the pillboxes are hexagon in shape, and they're constructed in such a way that they have these small slots for the guns to go through, and that's why they got their name pillbox, because they look like a letter slot on a pillar box. This is where the soldiers would stand, and they would be guarded from small firearms and grenades, but equally they were equipped and ready to fight. They were strategically positioned against the enemy. If you find yourself going through a battle today, then take heart, knowing you too are not called to hide away in some bunker, but you are strategically positioned in your life to fight the enemy, to fight the good fight. So take heart today, knowing you're not called to hide and cower away, but you're called to make a stand and make a difference in this world.
Well, that's Becky Murray, and the charity she founded, One by One, is on a mission to eradicate child slavery in Pakistan. I had a chat with her to find out more, and she started by explaining about that pillbox that's close to where she lives in Uttoxeter.
Yeah, the pillbox, I guess, you know, we're surrounded by things that we live next to each other all the time, and we take it for granted and don't give it much thought. But yeah, that particular day, I remember thinking, wow, you know, we've got a choice here of how we're positioned in life, and we can either hide away or we can do something with how we're positioned.
And where is that pillbox? Is that close to where you live?
It is. It's literally about 10 minutes away from my house. So yeah.
And are you in Uttoxeter?
I am, yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that bit of inspiration. We've appreciated that. Let's talk about your charity. Let's start from there, shall we? One by One.
So our Heart for One by One was founded. I met a little girl living on the streets back in 2006, and she simply had no shoes. So I bought her this little pair of flip-flops that only cost me 50 pence. And then that evening she approached me and she asked if she should wait in my hotel room. And 3 times I asked her what she meant, because I remember thinking, you know, here she is, this 9-year-old. I was in my early 20s at the time, and I'd spent 50 pence, so it wasn't some huge act of generosity. But sure enough, she thought I'd spent 50 pence on her so that I could have her body. And in that moment, I'd read about children selling their bodies for like a bottle of Coke or something like that. But that nothing can quite prepare you for the moment when a child looks you in the eye and thinks you deserve their body for the sake of 50 pence. And something within me broke that day, and I knew I had to give my life for children exactly like this little girl. And so that's why we launched One by One, that literally every single one of us can stop for the one in front of us and make a difference.
So this experience, this little girl, was this in Pakistan?
Yeah. No, the little girl actually was in Sierra Leone at the time. I was doing a short-term trip with my local church. So it was out in Sierra Leone, Africa. We should never live in a world where children think their body is worth 50 pence. And so every single one of us can make a difference by just loving with a genuine love, not loving to get something in return, but just to love people and let them see their worth and self-worth.
So the charity One by One isn't just about focusing on the situation in Pakistan. Is it worldwide?
Yes, so we actually run a large centre in Kenya where we look after about 200 kids, where we educate them and provide housing for those that have nowhere to go. That's almost like a village within the village, with medical centres and schools and all kinds of things, where actually one of our children has now since gone on to university, and yet she was never supposed to make it through primary school.
Wow.
So that's our huge work in Kenya. But then as a result of working there, we launched a project that helps girls at risk of human trafficking, because we found out it was happening in our village in Kenya. And that's what initially led us into Pakistan, just to do a one-off trip, or so we thought, for the Dignity Project, where we were able to reach 1,100 girls with the Dignity Project. But then as a result of that, that's when we were first taken into the brick factories. And I remember firstly being so shocked at the blatantness of the slavery. So up until this point, my only background was in human trafficking, where everything's hidden because everybody knows it's wrong. And yet here we were walking through this brick factories, meeting family after family after family, working in bonded labour. They're literally owned by the brickmasters, so they don't even own their own identity papers anymore. The brickmasters have all their IDs and they're owned. And so this particular family I met, I said, okay, well, tell me your story. How did you end up in this situation? And he said, well, 13 years ago, me and my wife were newly married and we became pregnant with our firstborn child. Everything was exciting and wonderful until my wife went into labour and there were complications and she needed an emergency cesarean. The problem was the surgery was going to cost $150 and they didn't have that. He knew if he went to a bank, he'd probably be declined because he was a poor man. But even if not, it would take weeks to process a loan. And so in order to save his wife and his unborn child, he did the only thing he knew to do, and that was to take a loan of a brickmaster for $150. He paid for the surgery, all went well, except 13 years later, I'm looking at this couple and their now teenage son, and they've since gone on and had a couple more kids. So I'm looking at a family of now 6 who are owned by a brickmaster for the sake of $150. Oh. Well, I said, well, I mean, my goodness, surely after 13 years of repaying this back, working 7 days a week to make bricks, surely you've paid off the debt now. And he said, no, now we owe $2,500 because the interest rate is so extortionate. We'll never really be able to pay it back.
Becky Murray founded the charity One by One to help poverty-stricken families and communities in other parts of the world. And as a result, discovered the child slavery epidemic in Pakistan. But how do you even start to try to help or eventually eradicate this nightmare?
Well, our heart was if we can negotiate freedom for the children and therefore get them an actual education. You see, for people born into brick factories, they never receive education. And so they'll never be able to get real employment. So if we can negotiate freedom for tiny kids who aren't good workers and therefore the brickmasters are allowing us to release them, get them full-time education, then in 10, 15 years' time, they'll be able to pay off their family's debt. But more than that, they can also sustain their families out of slavery in the future because they've got an actual employment. So they can provide the housing, provide the food, provide everything to sustain their family beyond the brick factories.
And have you managed to do that yet with any family, with any of the children? Is this a start of it all?
No, I'm delighted to say. So we actually opened our safe house up in 2019 and we now have over 50 kids that we've already rescued. And so for those kids, it's life-changing. This is phenomenal because their whole families are going to be impacted by this. However, on the trip where we went for the opening of the Grand Home, we went back into the brick factories. And as much as I'm thrilled for the 50 that are now in freedom, there are still hundreds still more trapped in slavery. And so we made a commitment back in 2019 that, okay, until we can get all these children out of slavery, we'll commit to going into the brick factories. And so we actually now do Sunday school across 50 brick factories, going into the brick factories, just bringing joy and hope and life to these kids so that for 1 hour a week, these kids get to be children. They get to belly laugh and have fun and play games and experience things that every single child should have the opportunity to experience.
It's utterly tragic, and it's so hard for us, you know, to hear this and just to begin to imagine that this is happening in the world today. Tell us about the launch of Operation Mercy then. I mean, this comes from a tragic story about a little girl called Mercy.
I received a phone call in May this year and I was told that a little girl called Mercy, who was 3 years old, had been raped and murdered. 3 years old. And her little body was just left on the brick factory floor because the mentality was, well, she's just a girl, she's just a slave. And it's almost like they're dehumanized. Slavery shouldn't even be something we're still talking about in 2021. But add into that then 3-year-olds being raped and murdered. And it was a case of that just cannot be. And so we decided, okay, even despite a pandemic, so this last year has been very challenging for many charities around the world. We've lost donors due to people being made redundant with COVID-19 and all sorts of stuff. But in the year of the greatest craziness for charities, we've decided, okay, we're going to double the size of our safe house so that before this Christmas, we'll be able to take in another 35 children. And so let's provide a safe place for them to pull them out of these horrors, give them education, give them a hope for the future, and change their cycle, change their cycle of slavery over their lives and their children's lives.
There'll be people who I'm sure are very moved by what you're telling us and the awful stories of corruption and tragedy. How do people donate, Becky, if they are feeling they are able, they are generous?
All by the website, which is onebyone.net, where they can donate a one-off amount, or they can choose to even sponsor one of the kids that we're taking into the children's home to then help them ongoing. So all the information's there on the website. And actually, we're currently having a match fund. So anyone who donates to Operation Mercy, there's a businessman who's going to match fund up to the value of £20,000 any donations given. So it all really, really helps to make a big difference.
There must be moments when you are dealing with all these stories and hearing what's going on, and your visits out there, I'm sure, as well, where you just think, this is hopeless. I'm fighting a losing battle. How am I going to make a difference?
Yeah, if I'm honest, many times I describe it like I'm holding a teaspoon in my hand and attempting to empty an ocean of need using a teaspoon. And compared to the vast needs, it's very overwhelming. But I think after my encounter with the little girl on the streets of Sierra Leone, she personalised the mission call, as it were. And so I take it back to the one. And every time it helps me. So I can help Mercy's family. I can help children like Mercy. And just as stopping for little Felicity changed my life all those years ago, I want to channel the sheer amount of needs to the one who stood in front of me today, because I can impact their life.
That's Becky Murray from Uttoxeter, founder of the charity One by One.